Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sunny Side podcast. Today, I am joined by Mr. Richard Titus. He is the CEO of a company called Kimono. They are an AI kind of communications. They're a very interesting company. I'm going to let Richard kind of introduce himself and talk a little bit about Kimono and what they are doing. But Richard, how are we doing, sir?
Hey, I'm pretty good. How are you? It's really great to see you again.
Flying. So, Richard, obviously, we've had a conversation. I know kind of who you are, what you do. Could you kind of give us a little bit of a summary of your background and what it is that you are doing nowadays, please, sir?
Yeah. So I describe myself, the easiest way to do the multi-hyphenate thing is say serial entrepreneur. My career has spanned a few decades now. I started as a musician and a technologist.
Really?
The things in the UK I'm well known for is I ran digital for the BBC. I worked for a guy named Eric Huggers. I helped build iPlayer, the mobile service, the website, and lots of other things. And then I was the CEO of the digital bits of DMGT called Associated Northcote Digital. So I ran Mail Online, all the classified businesses, and spent a good decade or so in the UK running digital media businesses. The companies I'm most famous for founding are Razorfish, Schematic, and Promptly, and then a whole bunch of other companies I'm affiliated with over the years. And I made a couple of movies, about 20 actually, but the most famous is called Who Killed the Electric Car? And he made some video games as well. So I'm a big multi-hyphenate.
Hi, so what haven't you done? You made some movies. I didn't know that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, right.
So, what are we doing now then, Richard? Obviously, could you kind of give a summary around kind of why you founded Kimono, what the whole thing of it was?
So when I left the Daily Mail, I was thinking about a bunch of things. I spent a bunch of time with a PE, that's private equity firm, almost purchased a company called Plaxo. It was one of the early social graph businesses. That for the old people in your audience, they'll remember this, is you used to get emails to update your contact details.
Yeah.
And it had been invested in and then acquired by Comcast, and it was being rolled into a CRM. They were thinking about selling it. I tried to buy it, and they basically decided not to sell it to me after a lot of meetings. But I've been obsessed with this idea of contact data because I have something called dyscalculia. So I'm neurodiverse, so I really struggle with numbers, particularly things like phone numbers, but also things like addition and subtraction, just really basic numbers. And yet I'm like Rain Man. I can look at a balance sheet or a cap table and show you the typo on line 5 because the pattern's out of whack.
Yeah.
And it makes people crazy because they're like, you can't even add or tell time, and you know like that there's a typo on the cap table. Like how do you do that? And I'm like, it's just like my brain. And so, from a very young age, particularly when I was young and dating, I needed to, capture people's phone numbers and contact details, and I needed a piece of software to do this. So I had an early pocket computer called a Psion. That's Psion. The software in Psion was called Symbian, and was the root core kernel that built Android was built on top of. So this is kind of an interesting side note. But I've been obsessed with contact data since I was a young person, and I kept waiting for someone to solve the very basic premise of the problem. And here's the problem. Every computer device in the world has contact data on it, right? Most humans have between 5 and 15 contact databases. The only thing I know for sure is that your contacts across those data are wrong, broken, misaligned, data misalignment. You've got people munged together. You somehow, either through software or through human error, have slowly mangled this data. And it's the only data type in the world that we don't have sort of data sovereignty. We push local copies and assume they're correct, when in fact they are most likely not correct and becoming less correct as they degrade over time. So that was the original premise, is let's fix contacts. It turns out the VCF standard changed 20 years ago and hasn't changed since, and Apple hasn't even adopted most of the changes they pushed in the standard.
Yeah.
But more importantly, it's abandonware. Like the problem of contacts is deeply abandonware at the core root. There's lots of interfaces, which I call what I call CRMs or things like this, but that core sense of identity and purpose doesn't exist. And when you insert agentic systems, that's AI agents, into the equation, this becomes an even bigger problem. And the joke I tell is OpenClaw, Claude Cowork, and Codex don't know who my daughter is, or what's different between her and the lovely lady in Africa I know from my work in the charity, right? Who's also named Zoe Titus. And they don't know that my dad, my uncle, my father, and my brother all are in Richard Titus, and all have at some point been affiliated with 3133 Puente Street.
Really?
Yeah. Also, my stepfather's name is Richard Osborne, but he also lived there at that as well.
They're all called Richard, really?
Right. This is like very common thing, right? But yet software pretends like it's an aberration.
Yeah.
Turns out that's my daughter.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So, what are you actually? So, what's the kind of the problem that you're fixing for businesses then?
So
So is
problem
it
one we
business or
started
is it
from is,
consumers?
yeah, problem one was just to fix your contacts, right? That was like a very easy thing. It actually turned out as we plugged into, and we use an array of 6 LLMs, including Gemini and Claude, but also a few frontier models. And as we did this, we realized there's something really, really powerful about this knowledge, and not just cleaning and not just like the cleanup project, but also knowing who someone is, right?
Yeah.
So you can do things like, even today, Kimono can do things like it knows that, hey, there's this person I have a friendly relationship but I've known with for a decade, but who is now one of the biggest super users of Kimono, and I probably should reach out to them because they had a bug last week that we should check in. Like your agentic systems, if they know who people are, when I say send that to Tony, they know I mean Tony, my lawyer, not Tony, my best friend.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so
This gets bigger and bigger. If you think about it, your agents don't know anything about you. They don't know about your graph. They don't understand the nature of relationships. They just know names, phone numbers, and maybe dates, depending on if it's Perplexity, it knows what date it is. If it's Claude, it doesn't.
yeah, that's actually crazy, isn't it? When you think about it like that. So, are you more targeting to the consumer side of things? So, like people will just buy it just so they can have all of their
So
contacts,
I'm
or would
glad
you
you asked
prefer
this
to sell to
question.
businesses?
When we originally conceived the idea, and look, by the way, this has evolved significantly since then.
Yeah.
So the original premise was just cleaning up your contacts. We're way more than that now, right? So one of the things though is we took our thesis initially was, if we started the data piece to solve just the data and not have a consumer proposition, means you do top down, which means you got to buy the data, which is you need $50 or $100 million to start the company. But because every user we interviewed, we did a survey, and this is not a scientific survey, no double blind, 350 people, 90% of them would pay for Kimono today to clean up their contacts, just from the basic premise, because everyone's contact data is broken. So we thought, let's start there, bottoms up. That data and learning can help us train our models, not on your data, but just on the patterns of understanding who a person is and these things, and that set of thinking and applications would be applicable to a whole bunch of other problems, and it turns out that's absolutely correct. The first product we're launching, Ask Kimono, which is in beta, you've seen it, I think, and your users, if they go to go.getkimono.com, they can sign up for the wait list, and we've got about 5,000 people ahead of you, but if you're nice, I do take bribes, you can cut the queue.
Yeah.
Maybe if you say you came from this podcast, I'll cut you earlier.
Nice.
Those users can sign up in the app. They can connect their Google, their Apple, their Microsoft, their SMS, iMessage if they're on Apple, Telegram, WhatsApp, sync all their knowledge there, and then use that currently in a chatbot where you can have it send emails and tell you things about your network. Who do I know at SA? What's my bank connection at SA? What are my follow-ups this week? Shortly though, and I have this on my computer, we have an alpha MCP which will allow me to plug that into Claude, OpenAI, Perplexity, and use those systems with the knowledge of your graph, which is, even in its rough state, because we just shipped it last week, wow. Like, I had a moment this weekend with Perplexity where my brain kind of exploded.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great.
Think about if your agents know who people are. Now, here's a really important premise to the core of the company. Privacy is our principal product, so privacy, security, and agency. Like, you own your contacts, you always will own them. You own that data. I'm never going to sell it to anyone else. I'm never going to use it without your. We say we take actions only with your instruction, not just consent. So I'm not going to go do a thing with your data without your instruction, not just consent. And if you leave, you take your data with you, you delete, it's done. Because that's the difference between me and everyone else in the sector. The second thing is, most agents think people exist in a single silo best case. Like, there are lots of people who connect Gmail, for instance, or they might get some LinkedIn data. But they don't have the graph across all those different channels, and no human I've ever met has one email and one phone number. Like, not even my mom, and she's pretty technically illiterate. Yeah.
True. It's actually really interesting to think about that then. So so is this actually out yet, or is this still in beta?
It's in beta. We've got a few hundred beta users and using it pretty actively. We're about to, that's why I'm encouraging your users to go to go.getkimono.com and sign up, because we're going to activate a whole bunch of users. We shipped a new AI harness this week. And as we ship that harness, we'll release a whole bunch of waitlists on the waitlist. So if you get on the waitlist, you'll get in early. Otherwise, it'll be in the App Store this summer. That's the plan. And,
Exciting.
Yeah, and think of it as a very sort of a rich man's OpenClaw, in the sense of it does a whole bunch of things that a lot of these OpenClaw or Cloud Cowork do, but very specifically targeted to sort of external facing, what we call super connectors, people with large Rolodexes who are very context centric. That's the first customer set, but it quickly goes to people like recruiters, accountants, any small business owner who has lots of, there's a whole bunch of other things we can do. And in going on this journey, we've done some really interesting things. Like we have a tool for when you go to conferences and meet people that you capture, just a QR code like any digital business card, but it captures your location and the context of the relationship. So as it builds that contact, it's not just some dude in LinkedIn I met 5 years ago, I don't remember why. It's, oh, I met him at this conference. He was an agentic engineer. We were looking to hire someone like that. I should reach out to him.
That makes sense. What kind of lessons? Obviously, you've got such a strong track record from so many different companies. Like, what do you think have been the main kind of lessons that you've took across your career that would allow you to just come in and really hit the ground running with a new startup like Kimono?
Well, it's funny. So I joke that I have this disease called being a founder, which is incurable and is definitely fatal at some point. Like,
yeah, not yet.
Yeah, it will kill you eventually. Founders see the world differently, and this is not an ego thing. It's founders see problems and instead of just sort of accepting and working around those problems, we seek to remove them or eliminate them. And so the contact thing, I kept waiting for someone to solve this. There's a company called Sunshine that was founded by the former CEO of Yahoo. And when she founded that company, I was like, oh, great. Someone's going to solve my problem, so I don't have to start a company. And then she released software, and it was terrible. And it was terrible for some reasons that were quite predictable and some reasons that were new problems. And I remember seeing that and thinking, all right, I have a vision for how to do this. Maybe I'm wrong too. I may fail just like her. And fine, right? But I can move the ball further downfield towards the end state of perfect reconciliation of this problem. And I felt very, very confident a year and a half ago when we started the company that I could do that. And we are nearing an end state where we're going to do that, hopefully. Fingers crossed as we ship this to customers. But more broadly, people always ask me, they look at my background, that doesn't make any sense. Most entrepreneurs have completely non-linear careers because we don't attack things the way most people attack them. So being a musician brought me to computers. Being into computers brought me to business. Being into business, each of these things built skill sets, but I do view the world in very different ways and through different lenses and filters, and it allows me to have insights that other people don't have. By the way, I have weaknesses too, like we said, I'm dyscalculic. I could never be an accountant. I'm really terrible at numbers. I'm great at managing businesses, but I'm catastrophically bad at like just the tactical details of scheduling a meeting or, like things that other people just do every day. I'm terrible at, but I'm good at these other things. So, one of the other things about being a really successful entrepreneur is mapping your skills and knowledge and expertise against what's needed and not trying to grind away doing a thing you're not very good at.
That's great advice. So what would be the ideal situation? Kind of find out where you excel, where you're good, and then hire a team to do the rest.
That's right. I always said, it's funny, I had a Razorfish, a company called Omnicom bought my agency and a bunch of other agencies and merged them together. And there was a guy I work with, I'm not going to name him because it's not fair. He works at Twitter. And I had this meeting with him and he's like, what's your career goal in Razorfish? And I said, to hire enough people that I can not work anymore and go retire and spend all the money I just got from the IPO.
Yeah.
And he was like, you're leaving? I said, I most definitely did not say that. It's like, but it is my end state goal is to hire perfect, amazing people to slowly replace all the parts of myself. And if I don't find anything new to do, then I'm done. Right? Which is not the same thing as saying I want to build it and leave. I have yet to achieve this goal in any company I've ever started. And there's been, 20 of them I've been involved in over the last 2 decades. Yeah.
Why do you think
wins, but some are small. Yeah.
Why do you think that is that you've just never done that?
It doesn't. It's sort of like AGI, average general intelligence. Like it's a goal. It's not a task. It's a goal, right? It's directionally where you're going as a North Star. It's very, very rare to reach it. I would say Bill Gates says he's done it at Microsoft, but if you really got him in a in a dark corner somewhere, he'd say, "Yeah, but here's these 15 things you're doing wrong now."
Yeah, really. So you've done an IPO as well. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, so I was part of the core founding teams. And core founding team, Razorfish was a roll-up, so it bought a bunch of agencies, including mine. That was one of the biggest learning lessons in terms of going from small business to large business very fast. I started that company in my spare bedroom in my apartment when I first got engaged to my first wife.
Yeah.
And 3 years later, we had 350 employees in Southern California, and we were doing millions and millions and millions in revenue, right? Now, as a funny side note, so Razorfish principally built websites and did software architecture, but originally in the early days of the internet, we were building websites. That was our primary business. So Kimono, I realized about 3 weeks ago we needed a new website. So Perplexity and I, in about $400 of compute, might have been $800 of compute, built Kimono's website, which you can see at www.kimono.inc. So I looked at that website at the end of a few days. And by the way, when I say built the website, like I was for half that time on my phone voice prompting it to do things.
Really?
And looking at the versions and giving her a brand guide. Like that's a $10,000 to $20,000 website in the old Tag Media days. I built for $800 of compute by myself with an agentic system.
That's crazy.
I mentioned that story because we are constantly iterating and evolving both as humans and our technical capacity and our tools. Like in the early days of the internet, these was very difficult to build and test and make these things all work. Where we are now, building them is really easy. Testing them, very hard. It's actually one of the hardest things now is AI slop and all of this agentic coding has made a whole bunch of people build a whole bunch of products, but QA, user testing, user acceptance testing, figuring out what users are doing, that's all I'd say exponentially worse now than it ever was. And no one has customer service anymore, so you can't call for help.
Hard one, isn't it? It's a bit of a, yeah, it is. But obviously in the future, do you think that will just kind of be like the norm? Obviously it will be.
I think we're going to figure out where software belongs and what it's good at, and we're going to figure out what it's not good at, right? And I think we will always need humans and machines, but the roles are shifting. We spent there's a guy named David Wolf whom I saw speak at the first TED Global in Scotland, and he talked about how we still teach linear mathematics, like addition and subtraction. You'll notice is a very important topic to me.
Yeah.
And he said, why? Calculators are now affordable at such a level that there is no human being on earth that cannot afford a calculator. Yeah. He's like, cost of goods is less than a penny. We should stop teaching those things, and we should teach everyone to program a computer, because that is a critical skill. Now, this is 15, 20 years ago when he gave this talk. I think he'd probably say something different now. But people are like, oh, core learning. I'm like, yeah, kind of. But like a lot of what we teach in school is rote repetition, which machines are exponentially better at than us. And what we are better at than them is lateral thinking, inference, intuition, looking at a pattern across a bunch of different things and seeing a thread that the machine can't see. Those are the things we should be emphasizing, the human piece. And then the human-machine interface piece is a thing we underinvest in, which is the most important interface point in the world right now.
That's an interesting perspective, that is. Well, how do you kind of see, what do you actually see the future of this AI kind of world that's we're kind of progressing into? I know it's such a hard question to answer, but like, do you think it will be the be-all and end-all, or do you think it will just become another tool? Or
So I'm going to answer in 3 ways. It's a great question, by the way. The first answer is, I remember going to pitches for Razorfish with IBM and Accenture, right? We were a big company, right? And I remember people would like have these flaming E circles. They talk about e-business is the future, and like, look, I went to a store down the street this morning to buy a thing and walk back, and that was pretty much the same experience I had 20 years ago when I lived 2 blocks from here.
Yeah.
It's like, it hasn't really changed much. Same store, same experience. That said, in those days, being an e-business was a moniker of sort of future state. Now, if you don't have a website, you're not a business, right? So I think AI is going to go through that same curve, right? Like right now, people who can use AI to exponentially extend their capabilities and reach are going to move faster and win more most of the time. And people who are behind won't all lose, but it is going to be a great sort of filter of changing the nature of success and failure in business. I think that I always look to my kids and think I have a 7.5-year-old and a 22-year-old, so I got a nice span of ages. You know, my middle daughter Zoe, who I just walked by, has never known a world without on-demand video. Like when I launched iPlayer, she was 5 or 6 years old. Her first streaming video experience was iPlayer, and there were no commercials. And the first time she saw commercial television, she's like, "Daddy, the TV's broken." I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "This man keeps interrupting it and shouting about like washing powder." And I was like, wow, she's right? From an abstract user perspective, she was 100% correct. But I wouldn't have had that insight because commercials are innate in broadcast television from my childhood. So I just assume it's part of the product, whereas she absolutely described it as an utter failure. So my youngest, who's 7-year-old, is just learning to read and write now. So now she's like super proud. She can like read the tags, and like we were playing Xbox this weekend, and she's like telling me what all the things said. That was 6 weeks ago. She couldn't read, but what she would do in Minecraft is she would voice to text the interface to control the interface of Minecraft, and she's a wicked Minecraft player.
Really?
And so I watch her and I think, I don't really, voice to text is a thing I use, but it's a feature. It's not a core. Her core computing interface is voice to text. Like typing is a deep number 3.
Interesting. What would you say? What would you say if you was to give? I want to say me, but I would say give yourself one bit of like just a bit of an advice or something that's like people. Obviously, you've done a lot of successful ventures. Like, what do you actually? If you could pinpoint that down to one thing, that's like, what would you actually say that'd be?
That's a really interesting question. So, one single insight is hard. What I would say is, the first and foremost is, so many people fail, and businesses, but people more than businesses, assuming current state is constant, and current state is never constant, right? So that is sort of first, lesson number 1 is that one. Lesson 2 is, if you talk to your customers, whoever they are, whoever gives you money or exchanges value with you for whatever it is you make, the more you talk with them and listen twice as much as you talk, the more you are going to make a step change in their experience and be able to take more money and make that a more successful relationship. And I would argue that's like true of even non-commercial relationships, but let's not go to therapy that. But that double listening, half talking is a super powerful thing when paired with this first one, right? And then the third one is, at no time in my life have I ever regretted spending more time with people I love versus working. Which sounds like the antithesis of being a successful entrepreneur, but it's not. Like, prioritize friends, family, shit that matters over work, because it all feeds back into a happy, successful community.
That's interesting advice. That so it's actually quite counterintuitive, isn't it, compared to what everybody kind of says. So what? So you would prefer to go and just spend some time with family, friends? Is that at this point of your career, or even when you was building?
All my life. Like my biggest regrets in my life were brief periods of time where I didn't follow all 3 pieces of those devices. Right? There were times where I thought I knew everything the customer wanted, and I was deeply, deeply wrong. There were times where I prioritized work and my career over my family, and all of those, they were always the wrong devices. Right? Those 3 things were always, if I used those as my guiding principles, I would have been probably 10x more successful.
Interesting. What would you say, like you said that you've got to kind of focus on what you're
and the end state, the current state, end state thing is really important. 2 years ago, you could not have imagined you have an AI that can build a website for $400 of compute in a few hours, right? It's not you couldn't have imagined it, right?
Yeah.
That happened super, super fast, and yet my car still doesn't fly.
Yeah, I mean, will that ever happen though?
No, it's like the technology is here. It's just not widely distributed. So one of those things happened lightning fast, and one is happening very, very slow. And there's a bunch, I could walk you through the reasons for that, but the important part is that current state is not end state. You there are so many variables that are hard to calculate, but what is 100% for sure is we are not going to stay in the current state.
In life and in business.
Yes.
I feel like that's actually quite refreshing to hear, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
so you have good months, bad months, whatever. So nice. What would you say? So you said that basically want to kind of work out what your skills are, work out what you are good at, hire the rest. What would you say that what's the thing that you've been good at across your career and through your companies? Like, what's been the main thing?
So I have sort of three superpowers. My first one is funny. I only realized this later in life. I'm part of something called the Creative Destruction Lab. It's a big AI and now deep science accelerator based. It started in Canada. It's all over the world.
Yeah.
And we did. I was awarded 2 years in a row to be what's called Fellow of the Year. So it's like as a person who advises startups, like the startup called Love Me, they wanted more of my time. And I was astonished by this, but they asked them all like what made me great, and they said you have this ability to synthesize super complex, imperfect information and turn it into a narrative that is digestible by people who may not have all those pieces. And I thought it's sort of storytelling, but it's a bit more storytelling plus meaning, right? And I think that leads to my second superpower, which is that intuition. Like I have this ability to grok something before the data supports it, and that helps me sort of not cheat necessarily, but understand directionally where to go deeper. You're not always correct. I'm catastrophically wrong. We're looking at our user data from like November, December right now to try and identify some core bug and usage data. And I had a thesis, it was about some bad engineering, and it turns out, there's some bad engineering. There's also like some user external world things that happen that cause people to not be as interested in us for a period of time before they came back, which I hadn't clocked, right? So there's just all this learning and data. And then that goes to my third superpower, which is I can sell. And that selling thing as a founder is really important because you've got to sell your team on joining you, you've got to sell customers on giving you money, you've got to sell partners on joining you to get the money from the customers to give to you and your team. And you've got to sell to investors, and you've got to eventually sell the company if you want to get an exit. So selling is a critical skill for all founders. And if you're not good at it, one of your early hires as soon as you need them is going to be someone who can sell and talk to other people, because you may be the smartest engineer in the world. If you can't get people to do things with you, then you achieve nothing.
Would you say that is one of the most, or if not the most important skill as an entrepreneur?
It's one of them, right? Yeah, it's funny. I had this debate with someone last week about design versus engineering, and this person thinks design doesn't matter, and I was like, I can make a shitty product that's beautiful and make money, but if you make a beautiful product, if you make the inverse, a brilliant product that looks shitty, no one will use it. It happens all the time.
Really? What would you say is more important?
I want both, just to be clear. But it's an interesting thing right? How many times have you purchased something that was really pretty and then didn't work, but you bought it because it was pretty, but you've never bought something that was really, really great, but impossible to use?
I feel like it's just how clear it looks on the page, in my opinion. Like how simple it is to use, to operate. Like if there's so much going on, it's just a bit like overwhelming.
Yeah. How many times have you bought a piece of software, used a piece of software, and it's like 20 steps to do the thing you got to do every day, and you just give up after a while?
Yeah, a lot of times, to be honest. I've bought so many things that I don't use anymore, especially on the software.
Yeah, this is kind of a funny insight, although I'm going to get in trouble. I've been a subscriber of something called TripIt because I'm dyscalculic, right? So for flight information and stuff, it reads my emails, it builds itineraries. I pay them some amount of money a year or whatever. And so one of my engineers saw this last week, and he's like, why do you still use that? And I'm like, because I'm dyscalculic. I just grew up, I want the flight info. He's like, we could build that in like an hour.
Really?
Like, we should for sure make it a feature. So that's that end state versus current state. So this assumption that was a whole, when they built it, it was really hard to do. Now it's a commodity.
How do you avoid becoming a commodity?
Constantly double down and focus on building things that cross sort of very grindy areas where a single LLM or AI can just grind through and do it better, faster, better, cheaper. And the other thing is customer attraction. So there's an interesting story. I'm not going to remember any of the names of these companies, but you can drop them in the links for people. So there's a whole bunch of legal startups, AI legal startups that started last year. They've raised billions of dollars in value, and they were basically an LLM wrapper for legal work for lawyers. Right, and I used a couple of them. They're cool, they're amazing. And then Microsoft and Claude all launched their own legal co-work product, if you will. Right?
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, these companies are going to die because of debt. Actually, it turns out neither of those things is true. So the ones who had got law firms to buy in for multi-year cycles are fine. Also, it turns out a generalist legal tool is nowhere near as good as one that's very, very close to the signal of customers and iterating and evolving rapidly. And the third thing is, it turns out there are a lot of lawyers, and they segment into a couple customer groups. And so what serves, our lawyers at Perkins Coie is a totally different tool than what serves, the sole practitioner who helped me file my trademark filing. They're different people.
Really? That's interesting. So, as we look into the future, just before we kind of wrap up, where do you actually kind of see Kimono? What's the vision? Maybe if you look kind of 2-3 years down the line, what are you anticipating?
So I describe this a lot as Plaid for contact data and context, really, right? So having an AI tool or an agentic system that knows who you are and knows a lot about you and your relationships and the context behind those relationships, and then having the ability to insert that in software to make those experiences better, that's a super powerful thing. And probably we end up as this infrastructural layer that everyone works with and connects to do things like Twilio or Plaid. But it's possible we get acquired by one of the big companies who wants to put this into their product. And I think both those are possible universes. But that's sort of where I'm thinking. I'm super excited right now because we're right on the leading edge of a really important problem. And I don't know of anyone doing what we're doing at scale.
Nice. Well, listen, Richard, if the audience wondering where can they find you, where can they get in touch, where is the best place for them to find you, sir?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, everything is at Richard Titus or at RxDXT are my handles almost everywhere. You can email me at titus@kimono.ceo. And my LinkedIn is pretty public as well. If you want to connect with me on Kimono, do it at kimono.id/Titus-oblique.
Nice. I'll put all of your links in the description, Richard. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Cheers.